All right, welcome back, everyone. We are going to be talking about microeconomics, chapter 18, and we're going to be talking about public economy. This will be a relatively short chapter. A lot of this stuff is a political science course, and really isn't a whole lot to do with economics, but we'll touch on some of it, all right? So, if you want to pause me, pull out your notes after you've read the chapter, and we will jump in. All right, section 18.1. I did use a few. No, I didn't. The book's visuals are not great. Again, that's what you get when you use a free book. The writing and the research is excellent. The visuals are not great. So I did a little research and pulled up some new visuals um, so that we can sort of look at American elections, not only from an American perspective, but also from a sort of cross-national perspective, so you can see where we stack up against other democracies. Okay. All right. So, voter turnout in America is relatively low. We in American presidential elections, the turnout tends to be around 54 to 60% generally. You can see here, this was the 2016 election, I believe, in the United States. Yeah, 2016 voter turnout was 55.7% of um, eligible voters. So remember, they're probably removing some felons, anyone who's under 18 years old. Um, Basically, anyone who is not an eligible voter, whether you're registered or not, doesn't matter. Are you eligible to vote? You know, above 18, an American citizen sort of thing, and did you vote? 55.7% of Americans voted, versus a high in Sweden of 82%. Uh, and there are a lot of reasons for this. One of them is because the American system is so sort of disconnected, I guess, compared to much of the rest of the world who runs a parliamentary style system. So you have a lot more options than just bad pick A versus bad pick B. There might be 6 or 7 different people, and you can vote for one of any of these different parties or individual candidates or etc. And then they'll even start to narrow it down. So, okay, now out of the 8 that everyone liked, we'll do a runoff with 3, and then we'll go down to 2 to try and make it a lot more democratic, quote unquote. All right. America, on the other hand, has a binary political system. We use what's called first past the post or a majoritarian electoral style. And so, this, by the rules of Downs' Theorem, which we'll talk about, a very, very famous book from 1957. It is a political science mainstay. But Downs' Theorem says because of the first past the post system, it is inevitable that you will only get 2 parties. There are some minor exceptions to this, like ethnic regional parties in India and other countries like that, where another party becomes viable because of ethnicity. I actually think this might be a possibility for a future Hispanic party in the southern states in the United States, but that's a whole different story, right? For the most part, as a law of science, 2 parties when you have a first past the post system. Okay, and so that tends to that's one of the disconnects in American politics that turns people off from voting. They feel like their own perspective and views aren't being seen. You have to sort of be lumped into one or the other, and it gets frustrating. Um, there are some other problems, like the American educational system doesn't really push a whole lot of civics or civic responsibility, things like this. Um, some of these countries also have laws that say you have to vote, and it's basically just a slap on the wrist if you don't. Um, but it helps to legitimize voting. It helps to reduce the uncertainty. It helps to get people to the polls. They make it easier to vote too, right? Like, it's a national holiday in most of these countries where you just get the day off, because why should you be asking for time off from work to go vote? Um, so you'll get the day off. A lot of them will have 24-hour voting for like 30 days, or you could just, um, you can mail in vote. We've seen a little bit of this movement in the United States, but we're not nearly where they are. in a lot of these sort of European countries. But there's a lot of reasons. In general, Americans tend to vote at a lower level. If you look at turnout by demographics, basically, we're going to talk about some of that too. The older you are, the more likely you are to vote, just period, in America. And this is probably because you have more free time, you have a lot more knowledge stored up over the years, you probably have more resources to be able to get to the polls, you have an interest in what happens in taxation policies and things like that. So there's this weird disconnect here too, where the people who will be most affected by policies for the next 50 years are the ones who are the least likely to show up to vote. And so there has actually been some very interesting literature and pushes in some European countries to start weighting the vote, to weight the vote of young people who don't show up actually higher than old people who do show up, because policies will affect them less because they're going to die soon, right? I know that sounds harsh, but this is economics, and economics is harsh. So that's sort of, there's been a bit of a push, especially after the Brexit vote in England, because a lot of the younger British, Irish, Scottish citizens are pissed off that the older generation forced them out of the EU, which is basically what happened. And they say, how dare you? You're about to die, and we're going to have to deal with the consequences of this for the next 50 years. You've scrapped our economy. You've destroyed our currency. People are, capital flight is happening out of London. For what? So it's really interesting, some of the new movements by youth, because youth is getting a little more into politics lately. It's at least since social media has made it a little more accessible, I guess. Okay. 2020 turnout was really high for a number of reasons as well. The vote is becoming more accessible basically across America. There are pushes in most legislatures, well, there were pre-2020 in most legislatures to make voting more accessible, because we do have a dearth of voting compared to other nations, and it's kind of an embarrassment for a democratic country to say, yeah, we're totally a democracy, but only 50% of our people vote. Yeah, I don't know how democratic that is, right? So, you also find that rich people tend to vote more. Again, this is because of resources. They have a bigger stake in what's going to happen to those resources. So, old, white, generally rich are the people who tend to vote the most. Remember, I'm saying tend, right? On average, they vote more often. Okay, Downs' rational voter theorem. I was wrong. I quoted the wrong one earlier. Downs' rational voter theorem says that if we want to start looking at politics and elections like economics, then we need to not ask the question, why do people show up to vote? Why don't people show up to vote? But why do they? Because it's a waste of time. It is a waste of resources in trying to educate yourself about the vote. And there is almost no chance whatsoever, in any possible sense, that your one vote will be the one that affects the outcome of the election. So really interesting question, really interesting whole strand of research. And if any of you are interested in sort of rational choice theory, rational voter behavior, these sorts of things, I would suggest this is the absolute starting point for all of that literature. So go read Downs' Rational Choice Theory. Okay, section 18.2, special interest politics. We should touch on some of this stuff. Some of this stuff is why economics doesn't work all that well sometimes, why we get less than efficient economic and political policies, right? Because of things like interest groups. We are seeing mass shootings across the country, And that might just be basically a negative externality of the power of the NRA for so long. And now that the NRA is sort of in disarray, they're having to move their headquarters because they're in a lot of legal trouble for corruption and theft of donations and all kinds of stuff. They are less powerful as a group, and so we might actually see some gun reform for the first time. But I think that's a good example of, oil companies would probably be the same. They're very, very powerful. Um, they are going to be pushing legislation that is good for them and not necessarily for society at large. And then, if you probably could think of some on the other side, like PETA. I don't want to just pick on right side political organizations. Some of these leftist organizations probably take things a bit too far, and it's when you're just fulfilling the needs or wants of very, very small groups, that often can mean devastating consequences for the society as a whole. And so this is why you get such a push for money reform in the American political system, because we are by far the most money inundated system, democratic system on earth, I think could be argued. Most countries have real limits on not only the time that you can buy up in advertising, but the money that you can spend. And most countries even have, like, the state will give you $500,000 toward a political campaign, just like it will give everyone the same $500,000 toward a political campaign. Make the best of it, but you're not going to go rounding up billions of dollars from people to manipulate our political system, right? And so we've got a very money inundated system, and special interest groups and lobbies are very powerful in the American system. And this is also something that people are really frustrated with, and there seems maybe to be a little movement. That's to be seen, but it should at least be recognized, right? Pork barrel spending is something I guess that should be mentioned. Again, most of this stuff is from a political science course. I think we're just going to end it after this, section 18.2. But pork barrel spending and log rolling are also related. Pork barrel spending is the idea that, yes, we are going to build infrastructure, but I'm only going to sign the bill if that $1.5 billion highway goes to my district, right? And there's a lot of this. This is sort of not just an American problem. This is a democratic problem, because you want your voters to see you doing things for them. But is that $1.5 billion best spent building that bridge to an uninhabited island in Alaska? Probably not, right? Yes, it probably helped that Alaskan senator or whatever get reelected, but did that help the American economy in any sense? Almost definitely not. It probably hired some people to build the bridge, and in that sense, yes, it was economically helpful, but it's not getting the most value out of its life, right? And so those are things that you really have to worry about, that are really dangerous, right? Wow, it sounds wonderful that we're spending $2 trillion in infrastructure. Where's it going? And are those the most efficacious ways of spending those dollars? Those are the things that we need to be more careful about, I think. And pork barrel spending and log rolling. Log rolling is just where I say, all right, I'll vote for your thing that is garbage and everyone knows it, if you vote for my thing that's garbage and everybody knows it. No, we both admit that this isn't going to help anyone. It's not going to help society at large, but it'll sure as hell get me reelected. And so there's a lot of that in American politics and in democratic politics in general. Yeah, we're going to leave it there. This is a short one. I hope you guys appreciate that. I'll get the test up ASAP. And I will see you soon. I hope you're happy and healthy. Have a great day. Bye.